Ambassador Carax of the Vix Theri Diplomatic Corps prided himself on understanding human military structure. His species' own hierarchy was beautifully logical, each rank designated by bioluminescent patterns that glowed beneath their translucent exoskeletons. No room for confusion, no space for doubt. So when he witnessed his first human medical emergency aboard United Earth Station Gamma, his carefully constructed understanding of authority shattered completely. The incident began during what should have been a routine tour of the station's military facilities. Carax, accompanied by his research assistant Tileth, was observing human combat drills when the accident occurred. A young lieutenant lost his footing on a maintenance walkway, resulting in a nasty fall. The station's commanding officer, Admiral Harrison, immediately moved to take charge, as protocol dictated. But before he could speak, a short human female in white garments strode onto the scene, her voice cutting through the chaos like a plasma torch through hull plating. "Everyone clear the area. Give him space," she commanded, not even acknowledging the Admiral's presence. Carax's auxiliary hearts nearly stopped at such blatant disregard for chain of command. On his homeworld, ignoring a superior officer would result in immediate disciplinary action. But what happened next defied all logic. Admiral Harrison, decorated veteran of 3 interstellar conflicts, stepped back without protest. "You heard Dr. Powell," he barked to the gathering crowd. "Clear the area." Carax's translator must be malfunctioning. Doctor. He knew this title, a civilian medical specialist. Yet here was a civilian ordering military personnel around as if she commanded the entire fleet. Even more bewildering, they obeyed without question. "Tileth," Carax whispered, his bioluminescence patterns flickering with confusion. "Make a note. This requires further study." Over the next several days, Carax observed similar incidents across the station. He watched in amazement as Dr. Powell and her medical team seemed to operate outside the normal chain of command entirely. They interrupted military briefings, redirected personnel, and even ordered high-ranking officers to get some rest, and that's an order. During one particularly memorable incident, he witnessed Dr. Powell march into the Admiral's own office during a strategic planning session. "Admiral," she said, holding up some kind of data device, "you've missed your last 3 physical examinations." "Doctor, I'm in the middle off." "No excuses. My medical bay. 1 hour." She turned to leave, then looked back. "Oh, and bring a current list of everything you've been eating. Those midnight snacks aren't as secret as you think they are." The Admiral of the entire station actually looked sheepish. "Yes, Doctor." Carax could contain his curiosity no longer. He requested a formal meeting with Dr. Powell to understand this extraordinary power structure. She agreed to meet him in the medical bay while conducting her rounds. "I don't understand," Carax admitted, watching her examine a patient's vital signs. "In Vex Theri society, authority flows from the top down. Clear, organized, efficient. But you seem to operate outside these structures entirely." Dr. Powell smiled, making a note in her medical records. "Ambassador, in medicine, authority flows from knowledge, not rank. When lives are at stake, the person who knows how to save them is the highest authority in the room, regardless of what symbols they wear on their uniform." "But how do your military commanders accept this arrangement?" "Because they know that when they're lying on my operating table, their rank doesn't matter. Their life does." She paused, checking another patient's readings. "Besides, they also know that I can order them to get every optional vaccination known to medical science if they give me too much trouble." Carax's patterns flickered with sudden understanding. "Ah, so it's enforced through medical threats." Dr. Powell laughed. "That's just a bonus. The real authority comes from trust. They trust us to keep them alive, and we trust them to let us do our jobs. Even when that means telling an admiral to eat his vegetables." As Carax prepared his report for the Vix Theri High Command, he realized he had discovered something far more significant than a quirk of human military structure. He had glimpsed a fundamental truth about human society, that sometimes the highest authority came not from power, but from the responsibility to preserve life itself. His final report contained a revolutionary recommendation that the Vix Ithari consider implementing their own version of medical authority, though he did suggest they skip the part about threatening high commanders with extra vaccinations. Some aspects of human medical authority, he decided, might be a bit too advanced for his species. For now, the diplomatic transport vessel Starweaver was meant to be Carax's triumph, the first joint human-Vex theory cruise designed to showcase the harmony between their species. Instead, it became his first lesson in how medical authority functioned during a genuine crisis. 3 days into the journey, alarms blared through the ship's corridors. Carax watched in fascination as Dr. Powell's successor, Dr. Isabella Rodriguez, burst into the bridge, her white coat billowing behind her. The ship's captain, a decorated Vix Ithari commander named Zurel, was in the middle of addressing the emergency, a radiation leak in the engine room. "Captain," Dr. Rodriguez interrupted, "I need this ship diverted to the nearest medical station immediately. We have radiation exposure victims." Zurel's bioluminescent patterns flashed with indignation. "Doctor, this vessel is on a diplomatic mission. We cannot." "With all due respect, Captain," Rodriguez cut in, her voice carrying that peculiar tone that Carax had come to recognize as Doctor Authority. "I have 12 crew members showing early signs of radiation poisoning. Their lives take priority over diplomatic schedules." Carax watched the familiar dance of authority unfold, but this time with much higher stakes. Zurel's patterns shifted through various colors of confusion and frustration before settling on a grudging acceptance. The captain had never faced this particular human phenomenon before. "The nearest medical facility is 3 days away at maximum speed," Zurel protested. "Then I suggest we get moving," Rodriguez replied, already reviewing patient data on her tablet. "And I need your engineering team to set up a temporary medical bay in Cargo Hold 2. It's the furthest from the radiation leak and has the best ventilation. That hold contains diplomatic supplies vital to, which are less vital than saving lives." Rodriguez looked up from her tablet, her expression softening slightly. "Captain, I understand the diplomatic importance of this mission, but right now I have crew members whose cells are literally being damaged by radiation. Every minute we delay increases their risk of permanent harm or death." Zurel's patterns cycled through several more colors before he gave the order to change course. Carax noticed something fascinating. The moment Zurel acknowledged the doctor's authority, the entire bridge crew, both human and Vex theory, seemed to relax slightly. There was comfort in knowing that someone knew exactly what needed to be done. Over the next hours, Carax observed as Dr. Rodriguez transformed the diplomatic vessel into a floating hospital. She commandeered crew quarters for additional patient space, redirected power from non-essential systems to medical equipment, and even ordered the ship's artificial gravity adjusted to help with patient comfort. Most remarkably, she somehow managed to unite the human and Vex Ithari medical teams, despite their vastly different approaches. When a Vex Ithari medical officer protested that certain human treatments might interact badly with their species' biology, Rodriguez listened, adapted, and created new protocols on the spot. "The key," she explained to Carax during a brief break, "is remembering that medicine isn't about who's in charge. It's about what works. Right now, we need both human and Vex Ithari medical knowledge to save these patients." The crisis reached its peak when the ship's environmental systems began showing signs of radiation contamination. Rodriguez marched onto the bridge again, this time with both human and Vex Ithari medical officers backing her. "Captain," she announced, "we need to shut down and purge the ventilation system in sectors 7 through 12. That will leave a quarter of the ship without air circulation," Zurel protested. "Better than leaving them with radioactive air circulation," Rodriguez countered. "We've prepared emergency protocols and temporary life support measures." Carax watched in amazement as the doctor proceeded to outline a complete emergency response plan that balanced both species' needs. She had clearly earned the respect of the Vex Ithari medical team. Their patterns glowed with the rare color combination that indicated professional admiration. When they finally reached the medical station, all 12 radiation victims were stable. As Carax prepared another report for his superiors, he reflected on how this incident differed from the first time he'd observed human medical authority. This wasn't just about doctors giving orders. It was about the power of specialized knowledge transcending species boundaries. "You seem deep in thought," Ambassador Rodriguez commented, finding him in the observation deck. "I'm wondering," he replied, his patterns shifting thoughtfully, "how your system would work on a larger scale, say during an interstellar crisis." Rodriguez smiled, checking something on her ever-present tablet. "Funny you should ask that. We just received word of an unusual illness outbreak on Starbase 47. Care to observe how we handle epidemics?" Carax's patterns flickered with excitement. This study of human medical authority was proving far more enlightening than he'd ever expected. And somehow, he suspected the most interesting parts were yet to come. The situation at Starbase 47 was already critical when Carax and Dr. Rodriguez arrived. The massive space station, normally a bustling hub of interstellar commerce, had become a quarantine zone. An unknown pathogen was affecting both humans and Vexthuri, causing severe respiratory distress and bizarre neurological symptoms. The moment their ship docked, Carax witnessed medical authority operating on a scale he'd never imagined. Dr. Rodriguez was immediately joined by the station's chief medical officer, Dr. Nathaniel Patel, a tall man whose calm demeanor seemed at odds with the chaos around them. "Station Admiral on deck," someone announced as Admiral Williams entered the medical bay. Before he could speak, Dr. Patel raised his hand. "With respect, Admiral, unless you've suddenly acquired an MD in the last hour, I need you to stay back. We got possible airborne transmission, and I won't risk the station's commanding officer." Carax's patterns flickered in anticipation of conflict, but the Admiral simply nodded. "What do you need from me, Doctor?" "Full lockdown of all public areas. And I mean full. No exceptions for diplomatic functions or trade negotiations. Dr. Rodriguez, glad you're here. Your experience with Vexthuri physiology will be crucial." The next 48 hours were a blur of activity. Carax watched in fascination as the medical team effectively took control of the entire station. They redirected power from entertainment districts to medical facilities, converted a cargo bay into an isolation ward, and even ordered the station's rotation adjusted to help with patient comfort. The most remarkable moment came when a group of merchant captains protested the lockdown. They had demanded to speak with the Admiral, but instead found themselves facing Dr. Patel and Dr. Rodriguez. "My cargo will spoil if we don't leave soon," one captain argued. "Do you know how much money? Do you know how quickly this pathogen could spread through an interstellar shipping network?" Rodriguez interrupted. "We're not just fighting an illness here. We're preventing a potential pandemic. This is ridiculous. I demand to speak to someone in actual authority." Dr. Patel's voice turned arctic. "Captain, right now my authority comes from Section 31 of the Interstellar Health Code. I can and will have your ship impounded and your entire crew quarantined for extended observation if you continue to resist these measures. Would you like me to demonstrate that authority?" The captains backed down quickly after that. Carax found himself drafted into the effort, his diplomatic skills proving useful in managing the increasingly tense relations between quarantined species. He observed how the medical team balanced their absolute authority with careful explanation and transparency. The breakthrough came on the third day. Carax was present when Dr. Rodriguez made the connection. The symptoms started appearing after that trade delegation from the Centauri sector. She mused, reviewing patient data. And the first cases were all near the hydroponics bay where they stored their botanical samples. Her eyes widened. She rushed to a microscope, examining something with intense concentration. "Dr. Patel, the Centauri flowering moss. It's releasing spores that are triggering in cross-species allergic reaction." Once they identified the cause, the solution became clear. The medical team developed a treatment protocol that worked for both species, while environmental systems were modified to filter out the harmful spores. As the crisis subsided, Korax found Dr. Patel in his office, finally taking a moment to rest. "I have a question," Korax said. "How do you balance such absolute authority with the responsibility it brings?" Patel smiled tiredly. "That's exactly it. The authority exists because of the responsibility, not the other way around. We don't give orders because we want to be in charge. We give them because someone has to make the hard calls to save lives. And everyone accepts this, even powerful military commanders. They accept it because they understand something crucial," Rodriguez added, entering with fresh coffee for both of them. "In a medical crisis, rank doesn't matter. Everyone's equally vulnerable. A virus doesn't care if you're an admiral or a janitor." Korax's patterns shifted to show understanding. "So the authority comes from the universal nature of medical need itself." "Exactly," Patel nodded. "Though it also helps that we can threaten them with extra vaccines if they get too difficult." "Dr. Patel," Korax's patterns flickered with amusement, "I'm beginning to think that particular aspect of medical authority is universal across your entire profession." As they shared a laugh, Korax realized something profound. The medical authority he'd been studying wasn't just a quirk of human organization. It was a testament to how civilization itself functioned best when power served the preservation of life. The implementation of human-style medical authority within the VIX Theory fleet was not, as Korax delicately noted in his reports, proceeding entirely smoothly. Standing in the newly renovated medical bay of the VIX Theory flagship, Luminous Dawn, he watched another cultural clash unfold. Chief Medical Officer Revol, her patterns glowing with the newly designated medical authority colors, stood facing Fleet Commander Extor. The commander's own patterns were cycling through various shades of confusion and indignation. "You cannot simply order me to modify my sleep cycle," Extor protested. "With respect, Commander, your current schedule is causing dangerous levels of fatigue. Either you adjust your rest periods voluntarily, or I will be forced to declare you temporarily unfit for command." Korax suppressed a flicker of amusement. Revol had clearly been studying under Dr. Rodriguez. The human doctor had been brought aboard as an advisor for the Medical Authority Integration Program, and her influence was becoming increasingly apparent. "This is not how VIX Theory command structure works," Extor insisted. "Actually," Dr. Rodriguez interjected, entering with her ever-present tablet, "this is exactly how it works now. The High Command approved these changes precisely because they understand that a commander's health affects the entire fleet." The integration program had begun 3 months ago, following Korax's extensive reports on human medical authority. The VIX Theory, ever practical, had recognized the advantages of having medical professionals who could override military protocol when health and safety were at risk. The challenges, however, were significant. VX Theory Society had always operated on strict hierarchical lines, with authority flowing from the top down. The concept of civilian doctors having power over military commanders was revolutionary, and not everyone was adapting well. Korax watched as Dr. Rodriguez demonstrated the new authority structure in action. She pulled up holographic displays showing the commander's biometric data, explaining in detail how sleep deprivation was affecting his decision-making capabilities. "Commander," she said firmly, "in the last week alone, your reaction time has decreased by 12%. In a combat situation, that could mean the difference between life and death, not just for you, but for your entire crew." Hester's patterns shifted to a more contemplative hue. "You have documentation of this. Would you like to see the comparative analysis? Revol and I have been monitoring the entire command staff's health metrics since the program began." The commander's patterns flickered with surprise. "The entire command staff?" "Oh yes," Rodriguez smiled. "You should see some of the other officers' caffeine intake levels. Though I suppose I shouldn't share that information. Doctor-patient confidentiality and all." The subtle reminder that she held sensitive information about his colleagues seemed to have the desired effect. Stir's patterns shifted to resignation. Very well. I will adjust my schedule. After he left, Corax approached the two doctors. Fascinating. You used his concern for his subordinates' respect to secure compliance. Medical authority isn't just about giving orders, Rodriguez explained. It's about helping people understand why those orders matter. Rivel's patterns glowed with newfound confidence. I'm learning that authority granted by knowledge is different from authority granted by rank. When I explain the medical reasons behind my decisions, even the most resistant officers eventually understand. The integration program was producing other interesting effects as well. Corax had noticed that younger VIX theory officers were starting to display more flexible thinking about hierarchy in general. The strict color coding of authority was gradually being supplemented by consideration of expertise and specialized knowledge. We had an incident last week, Rivel shared, her patterns showing pride. An engineering crisis where the junior technician knew more about the specific system than their superior. Thanks to our medical authority example, the superior officer actually stepped back and let the junior handle it. The real breakthrough, Rodriguez added, was when your high command realized that healthy crews perform better. The data from our first 3 months showed a 15% improvement in overall fleet efficiency. Corax's patterns shifted thoughtfully. So the authority structure is adapting because it demonstrably works better. Exactly. Though I still think we should implement my suggestion about the vaccination threats. Dr. Rodriguez, Corax's patterns flickered with amusement. I don't think the VIX theory are quite ready for that level of medical authority yet. Just then, a junior medical officer burst in, patterns flashing urgently. Doctors, we have a situation in the diplomatic sector. Some kind of toxic exposure affecting both species. Rodriguez and Rivel exchanged glances. Well, Rodriguez said, gathering her equipment, shall we show them how cross-species medical authority handles a crisis? As they hurried out, Corax realized he was witnessing more than just a cultural exchange. He was watching the evolution of both societies. The VX theory were learning that true authority could flow from knowledge and responsibility, while the humans were discovering how to integrate their medical authority system with a more structured hierarchy. The result was something entirely new and potentially more effective than either system alone. Assuming, of course, they could get Commander Extor to actually follow his new sleep schedule. The ultimate test of the new hybrid command structure came sooner than anyone expected. The Joint Fleet was conducting routine maneuvers near the Carina Nebula when the distress signal came in. This is Research Station Helios, the transmission crackled. We have multiple casualties, unknown chemical exposure, containment failing. Both human and VEX theory personnel affected. Corax stood on the bridge of the luminous dawn as both Dr. Rodriguez and Rivel took immediate command of the situation, a sight that would have been unthinkable just months ago. All ships maintain safe distance, Rodriguez ordered. Station's environmental systems could be compromised. Rivel's patterns glowed with medical authority as she added, prepare quarantine protocols on all vessels. Commander Extor, we'll need emergency medical teams ready for immediate deployment. The commander, who had actually been following his prescribed sleep schedule, responded without hesitation. Acknowledged, doctors. The fleet is at your disposal. The situation at Research Station Helios was worse than they'd anticipated. An experimental terraforming compound had mutated, creating a toxic gas that affected both species differently, but equally dangerously. Humans experienced respiratory distress, while VX's theory suffered neurological disruption of their bioluminescent patterns. We need to evacuate the station, Rodriguez announced, reviewing the initial scans. But we can't risk contaminating the rescue vessels. The Luminous Dawn's medical bay has the most advanced filtration systems, Rivel noted, her patterns showing intense concentration. We should coordinate the evacuation from there. What followed was a masterclass in cross-species medical authority. The doctors coordinated a complex rescue operation, directing military personnel from both fleets with precision, born of their combined expertise. Admiral Stevens, Rodriguez called out to the human fleet commander, "I need your ships to maintain a quarantine perimeter. No vessels in or out without medical clearance." Commander Extor, Revol added, "Redirect power from weapon systems to life support. We'll need the extra capacity for emergency medical equipment." Both military commanders complied without question, a scene that would have been unimaginable during Carax's first observations of medical authority. The integration of human medical authority with Vic's theory hierarchical structure had created something new, a system where expertise and rank worked in harmony rather than opposition. The crisis reached its peak when they discovered that the station's reactor was becoming unstable. They had less than 2 hours to complete the evacuation before potential catastrophic failure. "We don't have time to decontaminate everyone before transport," a junior medical officer reported, patterns showing distress. Rodriguez and Revol shared a look that transcended species differences. "Then we adapt," Rodriguez said firmly. "Revol, remember that experimental protocol we were developing." Revol's patterns brightened with realization. "The modified stasis fields. But they haven't been tested. We're testing them now. It's our best option for rapid evacuation while maintaining quarantine." Carax watched in amazement as the medical team implemented their risky but innovative solution. They used modified stasis fields to create individual quarantine bubbles around each evacu, allowing for rapid transport without risking contamination. The joint medical team worked seamlessly, human and Vex theory doctors moving in perfect coordination. They had exactly 4 minutes to spare when the last evacu was brought aboard, and the station's reactor went critical. In the aftermath, as both species' medical teams worked to treat the survivors, Carax found himself in the observation deck with Rodriguez and Revol. "You know," he said, his patterns showing deep satisfaction, "when I first observed human medical authority, I thought I was studying an anomaly. Instead, I was witnessing the future." Rodriguez smiled, checking patient data on her tablet. "The future of what?" "Of how our species can work together. Today, I saw human adaptability combined with Vex theory structure to save lives. That's more than just medical authority. It's evolution." Revol's patterns glowed with agreement, "Though I still think we should implement Dr. Rodriguez's suggestion about using vaccination threats. One step at a time," Rodriguez laughed. "Though speaking of vaccinations, Commander Extor is due for his annual physical." As the commander's panicked patterns became visible through the window of his ready room, Carax realized that some aspects of medical authority truly were universal. Whether human or Vex theory, it seemed that everyone in power lived in fear of their doctor's disapproving frown. And somehow, that made the galaxy feel a little more unified.